Static. White noise. They say it's good for you. Your brain can tune out all the distracting noises of the world and instead just focus on the one important thing of the moment. I always enjoyed static, the mindless noise that suffocates all others. Most people try to make the world of cars and people disappear behind a veil of music. But for me, white noise was always more efficient. Turn it on, and after the few moments that your mind takes to adjust, everything unimportant fades into the distance. Without the constant disturbances, your head feels light and clear, and your thoughts can flow freely. Music never did that for me. A few times, friends asked me whether it was damaging my hearing to listen to white noise all day. Of course, they were exaggerating. I only had my ears filled with static whenever I was alone or wanted to be and feel alone. Static was my escape from the world. Still, their doubts were justified. My doctor said it was okay as long as I gave my brain a break every few hours. Without a break, the brain might adjust to the background noise. It might get addicted to the background noise. I followed his advice and made sure that I unplugged my headphones at least every few hours. They felt so much like part of my body that I sometimes forgot to pull the cables out of my ears, but usually I did. I think I never silenced the world with white noise for more than 4 or 5 hours at a time. At least, not until my seizure. I'm not actually sure whether it was a seizure. It could have been a miniature stroke or anything else that is strong enough to make an adult human unconscious. They never found what it was, but that's not important. What is important is that I was alone at the time. I was on the bed of my rented one-room apartment with a book in my hand and white noise in my ears. I saw my hands cramp. The book fell. Then everything went black. If not for my brother, I think I might have died. He wanted to visit. He rang the doorbell. He called my phone. Then, after half a day, he called the police. They found me on the bed. My body was lying sideways with my head pushed against the wall. I had a crust of saliva around my mouth and a crust of blood around my ears. My brother said that in the hospital, I woke up screaming. When the blackness faded away, it was replaced first by pain and then by noise. Pain and noise. That has been my life for the last 6 months. Even for my friends, it took a while until they understood that I'm not just rude. They still stare at the headphones when I meet them, but they have adjusted. They know that I can hear them through the noise, and they know that I can't hear them anymore without my headphones. With strangers, it is more difficult. Shopkeepers and waitresses always look as if they want to stab me for my rudeness. Making new friends has become hard. Most think that I am trying to make some odd fashion statement. I gave up on dating. But the social implications are not what bothers me. I never was the person that is upset about an evening alone at home. What bothers me are the noises I hear in the rare moments without white noise to drown them out. My doctor says that those 3 days without a break made my brain get used to the white noise. He says it is like an addiction. My brain is accustomed to hearing a constant level of buzzing background, and it reacts strongly when the background noise is taken away. Whenever I pull the headphones out of my ears, the first thing I feel is disorientation, as if I am suddenly falling off a cliff. Then the noises start to scream in my ears. Without the white noise, my brain seems to amplify all noises it registers. The doctor says that when I take the white noise away, my brain is trying to find a new level of background noise. He says we all have our natural threshold as to which noises we notice and which we don't. I destroyed that threshold. I don't mean to say that I can hear more than other people. My hearing has not magically improved by being damaged. But now, Whenever the white noise is pulled from my ears, my brain does not know anymore what is background and what is not. My ears hear the same things as they always did, but now my brain consciously registers noises that before were swallowed by mental filters. What used to be background noise seems now, without white noise, as loud as a person speaking right into my ear. I hear a roaring sound, diffused sound waves of many sources, the natural white noise that we all have learned not to notice. But there are other noises too. They sound clunky and pale, like music amplified through cheap loudspeakers. But still, they are there, and they are real. I can hear car noises that I would have never noticed before. Despite the thick walls, I can hear my neighbor sweeping the floor, or watching TV, or having sex. I can hear cars 3 streets away. I hear my own heartbeat, and the blood pushing through my arms. I got used to those noises. Despite the screaming level, I would be able to live with them. What I can't live with are the voices. First I thought, they're just distant noises like all the others. But no matter where I go, no matter how deep I am in a forest or underwater, or how many layers of noise blockers are meant to keep them out, I can always hear them. Sometimes more, sometimes less. They vary with the environment. They are not just in my head. As said, they are clunky. Sometimes it's hard to even tell whether they are male or female. Still, I can recognize what they say. They speak about things to do. They discuss what should happen next.
The cup should fall. His knee should hit the table. Her spine should ache.
They don't always talk about me, although they do that too. I never noticed how many seemingly random events surround me. How the water drips, or the cup shakes slightly when it is placed back on the table. How the paper falls into the bin or flies past. There are at least 2 of these voices around everybody. There are at least 5 or 6 around every newborn. I think the newborns are not yet fully adjusted to the background noise. Sometimes, when the voices argue too loudly, the newborns wake up. They scream. With 2 or 3 years, children seem to have adjusted. They all don't notice anymore, even when the voices hiss and curse. I always thought it was good and bad luck. The open shoelaces and ripping grocery bags, the random wind that destroys the hairstyle, the tripping. But when I free my ears from the boundaries of the white noise, I now hear that luck is not random. The voices and their owners decide minutes ahead of time who will trip and who will miss the bus and who will not notice the approaching cars. Some of the voices seem to like the people they are attached to. I saw a boy, he was maybe 4 or 5, that walked without attention and still kept his ice cream in one hand and his feet straight on the floor. Minutes before she got out of her chair, I knew the voices would keep a woman's stroller from rolling down the slanted street even as she forgot to apply the brakes. But I also heard the other side. 2 or 3 voices hissing and laughing from their throats while they planned the next mishap. There was a man in a ripped suit. He ran only by me for a moment, but the voices had been there long before. I had heard them discuss that he would trip and fall and break his arm. And I heard another group of voices, 7 or 8, nearly in hysterics. They were ahead of a little girl of maybe 6 or 7 years. Her dress got stuck on a tree branch. Her paper money was blown from her hand. But I didn't worry about her because of the dress or the money. I heard them discuss in which way best to kill her. Whether to drown her or to hurl her in front of a car. While they discussed, the girl tipped her head to the side and waved at me. I must have stared at her. I waved back and she shyly ran after her mother. The voices followed her.
"A fire,"
said one of the voices.
"I like to hear her scream." "A good idea,"
said another.
"We just need to make sure her mother will see."
The rest I didn't hear. At the beginning, when I still thought they were just in my head, the voices that follow me were gentle most of the time. But they get more angry whenever I talk about them, whenever I mention them. I can hear them scream, right now. I can hear them argue that it can't be that I know. I know that they want to break my chair to punish me. Still, I can only hear. I can't see them. I can't touch them. And whatever they want to do, I can't stop them.
Last of the Sparks. My name is Aaron Sparks. Back in February 2008, I decided I needed to change my monotonous life. Whether that change would come in the form of a new job or a new toothbrush, I didn't know. I was never the most adventurous person. I've always found it difficult to veer away from my comfort zone, and the limit of my existence usually depended upon which book I was reading at the time. It took me a while to realize that most of the happiness in my life was derived from works of fiction, from stories I often found myself lost in for days at a time. I was an avid bookworm, as miserable an expression as that is. Once I realized my true outlet, I immediately knew what I wanted. I purchased a small shop, quit my boring job, renovated the building, and transformed it into a bookstore. I'd never been happier. The next 2 years were the best of my life. The store had become a huge hit with the locals. My perspective on work had been completely altered, and I was feeling genuinely happy for the first time since my childhood. It was during the winter of 2010 that she walked into my store. She stepped inside out of the snow and approached me with a large bin bag. Etchings of age covered her pale face and hands. She must have been at least 80 years old. Slamming the bag on the counter, she simply said, "These are for you." I looked inside the bag to find a selection of some of the greatest novels ever written. "Why?" I asked, confused. "Do you want money for these, or some kind of book trade?" "No, they're yours to have," she said. "Take them." A feeling of unease swept over me as I stood in the woman's presence. Her dirty gray fringe slightly concealed her face as a cold gaze met my vision. "Are you sure you want me to have them?" I asked. "Wouldn't you rather sell them?" "No, I have no use for them, or for money." "Okay, thank you. What's your name?" "Lucy." She departed from my store shortly after, muttering her final words. I found it all too strange that somebody would give away such great books for nothing, but I suppose some people are just nice. I made my way home that night and took the books with me so that I could go through them. I piled them all up on the table and was surprised to see that all of them were in fantastic condition. A couple of them seemed to be first editions, and others were versions I had never even seen before. It took me a moment to realize it, but the novels that I was looking at were not as I had remembered them to be. The first book that I picked up was The Green Mile. On the cover there was an image of John Coffey, smiling and holding two dead naked girls. I opened it up and flipped through the pages. In this version of the novel, he was in fact guilty of the rape and murder of both children. I made my way to the end of the book and read through the execution scene. All of the officers who had originally grown to love John Coffey in the original novel were now laughing uncontrollably and screaming racial taunts as he was being executed. My eyes had seen enough, and my stomach had felt enough, too. The next book I picked up was The Catcher in the Rye. The artwork upon the front page seemed to be of a dead body splattered on the street, as seen from an aerial perspective. I flipped through the book until I reached chapter 14. After Holden Caulfield speaks of messing with the idea of suicide, he suddenly breaks down in tears and jumps from the window, cracking his skull on the pavement below. The book abruptly ended after that. I then picked up Lord of the Flies. The defining image of this novel was of a large child with the face of a pig. He was covered in blood and surrounded by decaying corpses. After thumbing through a few pages, I reached a point of the story in which Piggy is described as being non-human, vicious, and a hungry animal. A chapter or so later, Jack insulted Piggy, which led him to lose his temper and rip Jack apart. Piggy then proceeded to kill and eat the rest of the children. The remainder of the book was the same line repeated over and over. Piggy sat alone on the island waiting for death. I read through the few books that were left in the pile, and they had all been changed in some sick way. The Great Gatsby, Wuthering Heights, To Kill a Mockingbird, Ulysses, every one of them. Just as I reached the bottom of the pile, I noticed that the final book was one that I've never even heard of before. It was called Last of the Sparks. Considering the contents of the other books thus far, I found the inclusion of my last name in the title unnerving. Still, it was just a book. The cover was of 6 gravestones, with words too small to be read, etched into the granite. I looked at the top corner of the book and noticed there was a sell-by date on it. June 4th, 2013. I nervously opened it up to the beginning of the story. Chapter 1. Alice Sparks. My stomach dropped as I read my mother's name upon the page. I felt dizzy and confused as I anxiously made my way through the chapter. It seemed to detail a regular day in the life of the character. That is until I reached the last page. Alice was crossing the road when the heel of her shoe broke, causing her to fall. She didn't get to her feet fast enough and a speeding car struck her, puncturing both of her lungs. I felt sick to my stomach. I put the book down and went straight to bed, hoping for some sleep. As it turned out, that was wishful thinking. I lay awake for most of the night as innumerable questions ran through my mind. By daybreak, I had managed to get a couple hours of sleep, but only after I spent an hour convincing myself that there was nothing to worry about. It's just a book, I told myself. It's just a book. The next morning when I got to work, I was feeling worse for wear. It wasn't until lunchtime that I began to perk up and regain a bit of energy. Then the phone rang. I answered the call, and I heard my father sobbing on the other end. I immediately knew what had happened. I closed the shop and ran to the hospital, but it was already too late. She was gone. The victim of a hit-and-run driver going 60 in a 35, they said. I spent the next couple of weeks helping take care of my dad. Me, my brother, and my sister stayed with him in turns and looked after him. We all looked after each other. It wasn't until a few months later I picked up Last of the Sparks again. It had scared me so much the last time that I considered tossing it in the trash. But I never did. Rather, I felt strangely compelled to hang on to it. I opened the book up to page 37. And there it was. Chapter 2. Patrick Sparks. The story was more of the same. A day in the life of a man that bore my father's name. It documented an ordinary day. Ordinary, that is, until the part where he shot himself in the kitchen whilst on the phone with his son. Suddenly, I was possessed by an urge to run to the phone and call my father, to speak with him, comfort him. But then I realized what I may be doing. Before I had the chance to hang up, someone picked up on the other end. Then he was gone. I got my black suit and tie out once more and repeated the same process for another parent. It ruined us all. After the funeral, I refused to touch the book. What if I caused these deaths by reading it? I couldn't go through it all again. But on Christmas Eve of 2011, I got a phone call from my brother's wife, Heather. Will had been putting up Christmas lights on the roof when he slipped on a patch of ice-coated shingles and broke his neck. He died almost instantly, the coroner said. I lost it. I threw the phone at the wall and began to sob into my sleeve. Anger took the pain away for a moment, long enough for me to pick up the book and read through chapter 3. It was exactly as Heather had described. I fell asleep and woke up the next day with the book still on my lap. I decided to read ahead and discover who would be the next to go, whether it be me or one of my sisters. Whoever was next, I was determined to warn them, or give myself advance notice, as the case may be. I turned the page. Chapter 4. Mary and Sarah Sparks. I rushed through the story as fast as I could until I reached the end. Both my sisters and their partners would drown in a lake after colliding with another car on a one-way bridge. That same sickly feeling overtook me. I met with my sisters later that day to exchange gifts, and I told them as calmly as I could that they ought to be careful while driving. I tried to sound as sincere as possible as I mentioned the lake, the bridge, and even the fact that all 4 of them would be in the car at the same time. Of course, they didn't take me seriously, chalking up my apprehension up to fears of losing more loved ones. But at least I told them. Mary and Sarah drowned 8 months later in August 2012. Following the funeral, I picked up the book and turned to the final pages. Chapter 5. Aaron Sparks. But I didn't read it. I decided I'd rather not live in fear for who knows how long. So I decided to save it for a later time. After all, there was a sell-by date on it for a reason. Everything has been normal for the past 5 months or so. I've lost interest in reading, though, so I'm back to my old miserable self. I questioned myself every day as to why the old woman was doing this to me. But it doesn't matter. It's all gonna be over soon anyway. I've just finished reading the final chapter. It's June 4th, 2013, and I'm sitting in my basement, waiting for her to arrive. That's the way the ending goes. Or so I've read.
The following testimony was emailed to me recently by an old friend. I haven't heard back from him. I hope he's okay. As you know, I'm in, or was in, training to be a coroner. My education was almost complete, and I had been working a paid internship with a well-known medical examiner in the Washington, D.C. area. All that changed a few hours ago when I was fired from the office for refusing to participate in what I believe to be a cover-up, even though they warned me about consequences for leaking any information about this case. My conscience wouldn't be clear if I kept quiet. This is something people need to know. A few days ago, we received a call from the Metro Police about a possible body discovered on the Red Line. Since working here, we've responded to a few calls in the subway system. The first time, it was a woman who tripped over someone's rolling suitcase while trying to pass by on the escalators. She ended up with a broken neck. Twice we went out there for a heart attack, once for a late-night mugging that went bad. The poor guy was stabbed repeatedly in the stomach, even though he handed over his watch and wallet like the mugger requested. So far, I haven't seen anything especially gory, and it was a bit of a letdown when the dispatch officer said the man was found just sitting on the train. Is it wrong that I've been looking forward to a call about someone either jumping or being pushed in front of a train? The interesting thing is the wording of the dispatch request. Possible body. If the word possible is in front of body, maybe it's the paramedics that should be responding and not the coroner's office. When we arrived, the paramedics actually were on the scene, so we figured it was just a miscommunication and we were called out prematurely. Police tape blocked off the entire station platform. From our view at the top of the escalators, we could tell something wasn't right. The paramedics stood outside the door to the train car and they weren't actually doing anything except arguing and pointing at a body slumped up against a window inside. We could have left, but since it was a slow evening, we decided to take a look anyway just to see what was going on. As we approached, I overheard some of the conversation between the two paramedics. "He's dead, right?" said the older of the two. "Dead people don't do that." "Do what?" I thought. Once they saw us, they quickly agreed that the man was dead and promptly left the scene to us. Clearly, this wasn't a call they wanted to handle. I can understand that. The police weren't much help either. I chatted with the officers on the scene while the doc went in to take a look at the man on the train. One of the detectives commented that there weren't any clear signs of foul play. The witnesses all claimed that the guy just sat down like everyone else and then he stopped breathing. Natural causes, I thought. Seemed like a pretty cut and dry case, but when I looked over my shoulder at the doc, he seemed confused. "Look at this," he said to me as I walked into the train. As I approached, it seemed like the man was just napping, like a lot of train riders do when they know their stop won't be coming up for a while. "Look at what?" I asked. "His eyes." The man's head was forward, with his chin to his chest, so that I had to kneel down to get a good look at his face. As I'm doing this, the doc is talking out loud like he tends to do, just going over his mental checklist. "Not breathing, no pulse, his skin is cold to the touch, approximate time of death, 6 to 8 hours ago." I'm in the aisle of the train, trying to make do with a pin flashlight since the dim lighting on the train wasn't helping things much. The man's eyes were open, and they seemed to be staring at me. It's not uncommon, so I lean in closer hoping to figure out what it is the doc wanted me to see so that I don't look like an idiot. And then he blinked. I jumped back as quick as a mongoose would jump away from a cobra. "What the fuck?" I tried to say. "Exactly," the doc said. "Gotta be a muscle spasm, right?" "You would think," he says. But watch this. He grabs the guy by the hair and pulls his head back. With his other hand, he waves a finger in front of the man's open eyes, which then began to follow along as the doc moves his finger left and right. Then the man looked at me and blinked again. "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" I ask. "Nope." "And he's dead?" "As a doornail." We let the officer in charge know that we couldn't determine the cause of death on site. A full autopsy would need to be performed to make any kind of determination. She made a note in the report that this body had a tendency to follow you with its eyes and occasionally blink. Off the record, she told me the whole case bothered her. The man, she said, didn't have any identification. Credit cards, watch, jewelry, a phone, or even money. All they found on him was a train ticket and a napkin. Once we had him back at the office, we changed into our examination coveralls. I was asked to deal with his clothing. The man watched me the whole time as I stripped off his business suit. He even winked at me once. Also, a few odd things were noted about the clothing. First, he wasn't wearing any undergarments. Normally people wear a t-shirt, boxers, a brief, and socks. This guy wore none of those things, but for some reason, he had on 2 belts, one over the other. The doc switched on his tape recorder and then turned on the buzzsaw. I watched as he performed the Y incision, and I made a mental note of his perfect technique so that I could try and do it better next time. I'm telling you, the doc is a real artist. Next came the enjoyable cracking sound as the ribcage was pried open. While this was happening, the man's eyes watched us. I could almost swear he was smiling too. Over the next hour, the doc made notes as he did the exam. He handed me each organ to be weighed and cataloged. There was nothing strange or out of the ordinary about any of the internal organs. "Okay," the doc said. "Let's take a look inside his head. I want to see what's causing the eye movement." "Listen, do you mind if we tape the eyes shut first?" I tried to remain as professional as I could, but the constant blinking unnerved me. The doc didn't mind, so I took some suture tape and worked up the courage to manually close the guy's eyelids and tape them down. Immediately, they started moving fast. His whole face was convulsing and contorting itself, trying to break free of the tape. "I don't think he likes that," the doc said, and then he removed the tape from the man's eyes. The violent motion stopped right away and the man winked at the doc. "This isn't natural," I said. "There's a scientific reason for everything. It's our job to find it," the doc replied. "But he actually fought to get the tape off his eyes." "I guess he wants to watch. Now, do you want to remove the skull or should I?" I'm too shaken to handle the equipment, so I watch as the doc works the saw around the man's skull. The bastard is smiling. I'm sure of it. He's staring at me and blinking his left eye and then his right eye back and forth. I hear the familiar popping sound caused by the top of a skull being pulled off. "Whoa. Okay," the doctor says. "What is it?" I ask as I'm walking around to see what he's seeing. The man's eyes follow me, of course. "I think I might have to call this one in." Dear God. The brain was missing. "Doc?" I ask. "Not now. Pack up and go home. I'll finish cleaning this up." He's saying this as he's already dialing a number on the phone. "But just go. I'll call you later." It isn't a request. I know when to shut up and listen. I make my way to the door knowing that the man is still staring at me. "And don't say anything to anyone." The doc never called me back. Each time I tried to reach him, it went to voicemail. I tried to go back the next day. Security won't let me in the building. They said I was to await further instructions while on paid leave. That was 4 days ago. This morning I hear a knock at my door. It's a man who said he was with the medical examiner's office, but he looks as if he's with the CIA, FBI, NSA, or some other 3-letter agency. He asks if he can come in to talk. I open the door to let him in, and as I do, I notice 2 other similarly dressed men sitting in a black Suburban across the street. The folder he hands me is a case file for the John Doe that was found on the train. All of the notes about the eye movement and the blinking were removed. There was no mention of anything out of the ordinary, let alone a missing brain. It's already got the doc's signature on it, and this man is asking for me to sign it as well. I try to tell him the file is wrong, but he holds up a hand to stop me from speaking. "This is how it happened. Sign it," he said. I ask about the doc. I want to know why I haven't heard from him. He says the doc has been let go. The way he says it makes me think the worst. I refuse to sign it and ask to speak to the director of the medical examiner's office. The man informs me that would be impossible and that I am to be fired. But fired isn't the word he used. The word he used was terminated. He leaves when I ask him to go, but he warns me that mentioning this to anyone would have serious consequences. As soon as the door closed behind him, I packed a bag and took off. I saw that a black Suburban was parked at the end of my street, and I might just be paranoid, but I think it pulled out after I did. Just in case I was being followed, I changed directions several times. When I felt it was safe enough, I pulled into a nearby residential neighborhood and found an open Wi-Fi signal. I think something strange is going on in DC, maybe elsewhere as well. I don't know what it could be, but I feel like the doc and I stumbled onto something we weren't supposed to know about, and now we're in danger. I found the doc's home number online. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. I tried to leave a message for him, but the line went dead once I began talking. If someone is monitoring my phone calls, it's possible my car is bugged too, and they already know exactly where I am. Again, maybe I'm just paranoid or crazy. Maybe there is a completely logical explanation for the scarecrow corpse that stares and blinks and winks and smiles. I can't imagine how anything like that could exist or why. I'm scared. Really, really scared. I decided the only thing to do would be to write this and email it out to everyone I know. Hopefully this information will make it to someone. If you've received this and haven't heard back from me by tomorrow, then I'm probably dead, and you'll know what I've written is true.